Hello, family members. I hope you'll join me as I roll a joint from the little bits of leftover joints that I have here, roaches, and talk about rhetoric. The reason that this came up to me is there is a YouTuber whose name is Ethan Klein. I'll admit I don't know much about him, other than he seems to be pretty well known in like lefty YouTube circles, streaming circles, whatever. But it has kind of gone off the rails because he's a Zionist, and that is not really very popular in lefty YouTube right now, or lefty anywhere right now. You know, most of us are not exactly happy about the fact that there is a genocide going on, and would like to see that stopped. And when people like Ethan Klein decide to see every single person in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, no matter, who they are, as terrorists, as Hamas, what can't you justify? That's not just something that happens to Palestinians either. Anyone who dares support Palestinian cause is going to be accused of being Hamas. As if Hamas isn't a very specific thing, right? But just everyone's Hamas. I'm Hamas because I'm not Zionist. Whatever, that's what people will think. And it's so ridiculous. But doing that, turning every single person in a group into your enemy, I think that's got to really be like damaging to your brain, like how are you going to be a good person if you think everyone around you, everyone in a particular group is like out to get you personally, It's going to warp your brain. And it's been kind of interesting to see how, someone who is used to being sort of on the right side of things suddenly not, and can't seem to get past their own rhetoric and see why. Well, anyway. It's not, of course, just Ethan Klein, or even his fellow Zionists that are engaging in this kind of totalizing rhetoric. I mean, you see it everywhere, left, right, and center, but it seems like the right is using it in unique and horrible ways. The idea of trans activists as opposed to trans people. There are a lot of gender critical people out there who believe that there's something wrong with all these trans people who are happy to just use rhetoric however they want to dehumanize and to justify themselves. They will say, I'm not against trans people, I'm against trans activists, as if there's a difference. Like, no, I don't have a problem with you. I only have a problem with you if you want to have rights. That's kind of messed up. But if they can frame it around these deranged trans activists instead of just trans people in general, it makes them seem just a slightly less bigoted. Just enough that the people who want to think that they're not fully bigoted have that plausible deniability. There's been a movement over the last few years to, you know, sort of rethink how we use language. Two of the probably most prominent examples I can think of right off the top of my head would be using the words unhoused and enslaved people instead of homeless and slaves. Unhoused people, enslaved people, thereby centering their personhood and just taking that identity that had been put upon them based on one assumed characteristic and removing it. I mean, I know growing up like in America as I did in a rural place, to me, a homeless person is some scary guy with a scraggly old beard or whatever, you know, like someone who you would be a little bit frightened of, right? That's the image that comes to mind. And that's not an accurate picture. I mean, there are unhoused people that look like that, and you know, I'm not going to say that all unhoused people are not scary. There are unhoused people who are nice. There are unhoused people who are not nice. They're just people, just like anyone else. I have a lot of ancestors that have been here longer than the United States have been a thing. I've gone back, I've traced my ancestry along several different lines and come across multiple documents showing various slave-owning ancestors. And so I've had to deal with what it is to have a slave owner in your family tree. I had people, my ancestors, who gaslit other human beings into thinking that they could own other human beings. That they were better and worth more and had the right to treat other people like livestock. And that was done in my name. You know, they did it for themselves and their descendants, and I am one of their descendants. And I still live in the, you know, systematically oppressive society that they help create. And I benefit from some of the oppressive systems they put in place. It's still happening. You know, we're not past it. It's not over. All because they could look at a person and think of them as a slave, like it was an intrinsic thing. Like there was something about them that was different, lesser. They let rhetoric turn them into inhuman monsters. There's no such thing as a good slave owner. I'm sorry. I'd like to believe that. But anyone who has the power to sell a woman's child, take her child away from her, to beat a man bloody just because they feel like it. It doesn't matter if they did it or not. They could have. And they were okay existing in a system that gave them that false authority. Dehumanizing language really allows us to do all sorts of horrible things. You know, I really have found that since I stopped using the word slaves and started using enslaved people, or thinking of people who were enslaved in different ways than just using the terminology slaves, it really has changed the way I look at my own history. And we forget how powerful words can be. I'm tired. I'm just tired of all this totalizing language. I wish we could just be a little bit more nuanced. When you simplify something to make it easier for you to understand, then you make it much harder for you to understand where you are wrong. If you're committed to the idea that all people who oppose Zionism are terrorists, are Hamas, and reality provides you all sorts of evidence to disprove that, it's going to be so much easier for you to just look the other way. To not have to redefine the way you look at the world, because you've already decided how it is. You know, I think that's part of the reason why it's so problematic when you hear men refer to women as like bitches or hoes or whatever, you know? I was watching a video about classic Hollywood, and there was a studio exec that referred to all actresses as studio hookers, you know? You don't have to treat studio hookers right. Human people, maybe, but not studio hookers. I see it a lot with the word fat. I used to work at a group home. I'd have these teenage boys, and most of them were there fairly short term, but we had a few that were with us a bit longer, and you got a little closer to them. And one thing I noticed is when they liked me, I was not fat. When they were mad at me, I was fat. It's interesting, isn't it? How we load all these connotations and all these meanings and all this permission to dehumanize into terms that we then use to weaponize against other people, and sometimes in very casual ways. You know, it's not always meant as aggressive insult. It just might be that casually decided to be spoken about that way, you know? You know, it's funny to me that the R word seems to be one of the things that these right-wing goons are really excited about. We can use the R word again. I'm like, it's interesting because when my dad was first starting as a teacher of profoundly mentally disabled children, the term retarded was a new term, and it was considered the polite clinical term. It wasn't a slur. But because it was the clinical term, it got picked up and used in common language and became the slur that it is. And now it doesn't mean someone who's intellectually disabled. It means someone who's acting foolishly. And there's a huge difference there. And it's really insulting. Like, just because someone is intellectually disabled does not mean that they act stupidly. You know what I mean? Does not mean that they act without logic or thought or care. It's so frustrating because it keeps happening. Every time that there is a polite clinical term that is created to try to describe disabled people, you get some weird jerks out there that decide to make it an insult for people who it doesn't apply to in a way that is insulting to us and the person they're trying to insult, I suppose. But yeah, I have known a lot of intellectually disabled people, and they're, a lot of them, extremely considerate people. The idea that saying, hey, you not intellectually disabled person who is acting foolishly, you're acting like this intellectually disabled person. That's so weird to me. It's so pointlessly cruel and judgmental and dismissive. And handicap is the same way. It started out as a polite term. Every time disabled people and their allies try to come up with a colloquial term that is at least neutral, if not positive, it will be loaded with all sorts of negative connotations. And by the general public, and then we'll have to try again, and then they'll probably just do the same thing again. It's really frustrating. It's really frustrating. And you see the queer community kind of fight back against that by reclaiming slurs. And I think that's one really good thing you can do. But the disability community is just, it's so diverse and segmented, and it's so many different things that, I mean, it's not like, I don't think you're going to get any sort of agreement because it's just too broad a swath of people, you know? It's a lot easier for people to weaponize rhetoric against a group that they have lumped together artificially than for that artificially lumped together group to be able to create rhetoric back. You know what I'm saying? They unite us in their heads, but we're not. Like, I don't really have that much in common with deaf people who are sign language users. That is a culture that I live completely apart from. I know very little ASL. I know like finger spelling and a few words. That's it. Just a little bit, you know, that my dad taught me because he taught deaf and blind kids and stuff like that too. And yeah. Anyway, so I got off track. Forgive me. This rhetoric, you know, the way that we talk, the way that the way that men insult other men by calling them feminine. That rhetoric is an insult to women as the base assumption before you even get to the insult to the individual. I'm going to insult all women first and you then also. And that's frustrating. But that's where we are. Well, family members, I think I got my point across. I'll let you go. Have a nice day. Bye.